Anything that is visible to the naked eye, even the tiniest thing visible to the naked eye, is immediately under the effect of gravity, so it falls. But just anything just below what's visible to the naked eye doesn't do that. It's sort of mind-blowing, but it doesn't do that, because as soon as it's out of your nose and your mouth, it starts to rapidly evaporate and becomes significantly smaller. And it's also in the warm air from our body, and so it goes up. So it's not falling to the ground at all. It's going up and it's lingering in the air. And so the kind of image I have of it is like Pigpen from Charlie Brown, where people are surrounded by this cloud of aerosols that they're producing all of the time, and they're being left behind as they walk down the street. And it then can move through the air from place to place. And so, what that means is that somebody who's very sick at home and producing literally millions of virus particles, and tens of millions overnight, that material will get into the general air. And if it's at night time, there is no UV light around to do anything about it, it will move to their neighbours. And we've seen that happen with SARS-1. So there was a nice study in SARS-1 of an apartment block in Hong Kong where there were 6 tower blocks arranged in a sort of hexagon arrangement, and physicists predicted, based on people who were infected in the ground floor flats of one block, who was going to be infected next in the upstairs flats of blocks in the wind direction. And they got it right, because that's how it spread. And once you've understood this principle, all sorts of things start to fall into place. The modelling was suggesting that would take weeks and weeks, like 14 weeks to reach a peak in every part of the country. Now that is nothing like what happened in the real world anywhere. In the real world, it was switched on almost immediately across huge areas. But if you look across continents, you can see sort of time differences as it moved across. So, when you're seeing it as being spread in aerosols through the air, it starts to make sense. And one of the other things the modellers had set out as a claim was that the peak would be, in spring 2020, they reckoned the peak would be in July. That was what they were modelling. They thought everyone was susceptible, it would carry on spreading and spreading and spreading, it would peak in July, and that their interventions would squash the curve, slow the spread, and delay that peak to after July. Well, it peaked in April. It peaked in April. And then when they reduced the restrictions, the modeller said, we'll have a rebound. Every time we relax, there's going to be a rebound, and we're going to have to keep intervening to keep it under control. There was no rebound. It peaked, and then it went away, and then it comes back in a seasonal manner subsequently.
So many fascinating things there again, Claire. The sheer human arrogance, really, that we can control a virus, which are these forces of nature. Viruses, we need them for the ecosystem, of course, but in some cases they go wrong and become pathological. But human beings, we're so clever, we can sort this out. The arrogance of that is quite incredible. And this simplistic idea that, to put it quite crudely, A slobbers on B, who slobbers on C, who slobbers on D, simplistic beyond description, and as we've said, an antithesis against this miasma theory.
And we had evidence very early on that wasn't the case. So if you remember the stories of the choir rehearsals and the restaurants with the air conditioning and the buses, it was clearly not just people who were in the very close vicinity, face to face with people, and yet that was all just ignored and suppressed. And the people who were saying it spreads through aerosols were called misinformation spreaders by the WHO. So it's all part of a pattern, really, isn't it?
And the practical applications in terms of the pandemic for that misunderstanding, Claire, can you just sort of spell that out for me a bit?
Well, yeah. So if you think back to the kinds of restrictions that were in place, we had one-way systems and perspex screens. And the perspex screens were counterproductive, because if you've got aerosols in the air, the perspex screens cause them to collect, so that you're getting a higher dosage than you otherwise would do if you had proper airflow through a room. So they were completely counterproductive. And you had all the social distancing that just caused horrible harm in terms of people being allowed to be with other people when they needed to be. And then, of course, the masks come into play, right? So if you believe spread is through droplets that are being spat out of somebody's mouth as they talk, then a mask is going to help. It's going to help. You know, I accept that. But if you realise that's not how it spreads, then you've got two problems. One problem is the gaps all around the cloth mask, where that's actually where the air's going in and out, so it has no impact at all. But the other problem is anything that you are spitting onto the mask, you're then breathing over it. So you're going to aerosolise what's on the mask. And if you look at the data in the real world of what happened when masking mandates were brought in, every single time there was a difference between one region and another, or one country and another, it was always the masked one that was doing worse.
Interesting. Yeah.